Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Richard Mollett, and I'll be getting us started today. If I can move my screen. We just started on Instagram, so if you could scan the QR code and join us on social media. We post upcoming programs on Instagram. We post reports and news on Instagram as well, diversifying from Twitter/X. So please do join us on Instagram. Just as a reminder, before we get started, if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. If you have comments, if you need technical assistance, if you just want to say hello, you, of course, are welcome to do that in the chat. But again, in order for us to address any questions, please put them in the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. A little bit about LTCCC. For those of you who are not familiar with us, we are a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization entirely dedicated to improving care and quality of life for residents in nursing homes and assisted living. We do policy research and analysis, and from that, we do systems advocacy. More and more over the past dozen or so years, we've been doing public education, including programs like this. We have a host of information and resources on our website, nursingHome411.org, including a family council toolkit, family and ombudsman resources, dementia care advocacy toolkit, data on nursing home staffing, as I mentioned before, and more. And lastly, we are also proud home, I should say, to 2 local long-term care ombudsman programs here in our home state of New York. Today's webinar, which I'm really excited about, is Disability Rights and Self-Determination in Nursing Homes and Long-Term Care Settings. This was actually a program that was provided at the annual conference of the Consumer Voice last November, I believe it was. And unfortunately, I missed it because I was presenting at the same time, so I wasn't able to attend. So part of my asking our guests to speak today is entirely selfish. I wanted to see the program myself, but I thought it was a great topic and so important, so I wanted to share it as well. For materials from today's webinar, again, visit the website at the bottom of your screen. It'll also be posted on our YouTube channel by the end of the week. For anyone who misses it, they can catch it on our website or on our YouTube channel. A little bit about our presenters. Bren Pramanik is the managing attorney at Disability Rights New Jersey. Bren, am I pronouncing your name correctly? I apologize.
Yes.
Check before. Yep. Thank you. Bren manages a team of attorneys and advocates representing individuals with disabilities in institutional settings throughout New Jersey, including psychiatric hospitals, nursing homes, and developmental centers. Where's your office, Bren?
So our office is located in Trenton, New Jersey.
Trenton. Thank you. I'm in Hoboken, New Jersey, so I had to ask. Hannah Diamond, who I've known for many years, she's a policy advocate with Justice and Aging. Within her position, she advocates at the state and federal levels to improve quality and accessibility of HCBS, home and community-based services, for older adults and people with disabilities. And last but certainly not least is someone I'm very fond of, Amy Brown, Director of Outreach and Advocacy for the New Jersey Long-Term Care Ombudsman Program. Amy directs the outreach and advocacy for I Choose Home-New Jersey, a federal initiative that transitions low-income individuals out of institutions such as nursing homes and developmental centers back into home and community-based settings. She's a tremendous expert and advocate on long-term care, nursing home, and adult care facility issues. So I'm really excited to have all 3 of our guests today, and I will hand it over to Bren to get started.
Great, thank you very much. And thank you everybody for being here today. Just for Richard's benefit, I think we can assume that the Consumer Voice Conference was kind of our dress rehearsal, and this is, we've worked out all the kinks and we've got our full run today. So thanks everybody for being here. We are going to talk about New Jersey to nationwide, leveraging lessons learned to advance the promise of Olmstead for older adults and people with disabilities. Next slide, please. So just the agenda for today's session. So I'm going to start us off by going into a little bit into the background of some federal laws, just to give us a little bit of context related to what we're speaking about. And then I am going to go into our work at Disability Rights New Jersey. And we did an investigation into people with intellectual and developmental disabilities in nursing homes. And then Amy is going to present on the New Jersey Long-Term Care Ombudsman's perspective and really what they're seeing on the front lines. And then Hannah will round us out talking about some of the inequities in home and community-based settings, and some ways and hopefully to change that. Next slide, please. So just kind of setting the stage for what we're talking about, I'm going to just briefly go over some federal law that really relates to the rights that individuals have in nursing home settings, starting first with Olmstead and the Americans with Disabilities Act. Then I will touch upon the federal HCBS settings rule, really more specific person-centered planning, and then speak a bit about Section 504 of the Rehab Act. Next slide, please. I'm not going to spend too much time kind of going into the specifics of all of these federal laws, but I did just want to provide just a brief overview because I do think it provides so much context for what we're speaking about. The ADA was established back in 1990, and Olmstead was a Supreme Court decision that came down in 1999. And it held that unjustified segregation and isolation of people with disabilities, particularly in institutional settings, is a violation of Title II of the Americans with Disabilities Act. And so Olmstead, particularly for our work at Disability Rights New Jersey, my team focuses on people living in institutional settings like nursing homes. And Olmstead provides a framework for a lot of what we do, because again, it's saying that it's unjustified segregation to be placing people with disabilities in institutional settings like nursing homes. Olmstead also held that the state must provide services and supports to people with disabilities in the most integrated setting appropriate to the needs of the individual. And that is, of course, a really important part of Olmstead, and is something that, there's a lot of conversation even today about what is the most integrated setting. And then finally, that settings must enable people with disabilities to interact with non-disabled persons to the fullest extent possible. And again, this is really making sure that this is all encompassing, that individuals with disabilities are not just kind of only with other individuals with disabilities, that they are fully integrated into society, and they aren't living in these institutional settings. And these requirements under Olmstead do apply to nursing homes as well. Next slide, please. And then next, just some brief background on the home and community-based settings rule. And so this was first in 2014, the person-centered planning rights came into effect. And along with that, there's a requirement for there to be a planning process, for there to be a written plan around around somebody's rights for person-centered planning, and that there is review of this service plan as well. The HCBS settings rule was fully implemented in March of 2023, and that established minimum standards to ensure truly non-institutional settings, ensure that HCBS residents have the same access to the community, and that provider-owned or controlled settings, that there's a special concern about eviction and due process for protection rights for residents of provider-owned settings. And then the nursing home regulations in 2016 also included the person-centered planning rule as well. Next slide, please. And then finally, just rounding us out, is Section 504 of the Rehab Act. This was really the first civil rights legislation that protected people with disabilities from discrimination. It prohibits discrimination on the basis of disability in any program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. It often is, it's similar in a lot of ways to the Americans with Disabilities Act. And there, I believe, so the comment period, I believe, ended back in November of 2023, but there were some proposed changes to the regulations for the Section 504 that's really trying to incorporate some of the language and make sure that 504 aligns with ADA and Olmsted. Next slide, please. So at Disability Rights New Jersey, we are the protection and advocacy agency for the state of New Jersey. We've been designated as the PNA since 1994. And so every state and territory in the United States has a protection and advocacy agency. And we are pretty unique in the respect that we have an access authority to places where people with disabilities live and receive services. So that obviously includes institutional settings like psychiatric hospitals, developmental centers, nursing homes, but that can also include services in the community where people with disabilities live and work. And we do also have, in addition to that access authority, we have access to certain records, and we're really at our core a legal services agency where we can provide legal representation, legal advocacy to individuals that are living with disabilities in New Jersey. And so we have this authority to monitor and investigate allegations of abuse and neglect in nursing facilities. And sometimes it's really helpful to kind of frame it in terms of the long-term care ombudsman has a very similar authority when it comes to nursing facilities. So we can both have access to records, access to the facilities, and the opportunity to speak with people and investigate allegations of abuse and neglect. Next slide, please. So this investigation that Disability Rights did, it really started prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, but was really kind of our concerns, I think, as many advocates in this realm were exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. So we had previously had concerns that individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities were being unnecessarily institutionalized in nursing facilities. And, you know, as many of us know, COVID-19 really kind of highlighted the fact that these congregate institutional settings like nursing homes could be extremely problematic for individuals. So Disability Rights New Jersey, we launched a formal investigation in early 2022 to really kind of look at people being unnecessarily segregated in nursing homes. Next slide, please. So in order to conduct this investigation, we had reached out to a number of individuals in the state to try to get a list of people with intellectual and developmental disabilities that were residing in nursing homes. We ended up with a list of about 350 people, or about almost 500 people, and we made an effort to visit as many of those people as we could. We ended up visiting about 350 people, and we wanted to make sure that we had a pretty good swath of the population in New Jersey. And we collected face sheets, PASSRs, and Guardian information. And so what we were really trying to figure out at the end of the day is, why were people with intellectual and developmental disabilities in nursing facilities? Kind of how did they get there? Are these places that they wanted to be? And are there options for them to be in a less restrictive setting than a nursing facility? Next slide, please. So we had 3 key findings in the report, and I'll just go over each of them quickly. So key finding 1 was that the state of New Jersey does not have an accurate count of the number of people with IDD that were living in nursing facilities. Again, we were provided with a list of about 600 people, but there were some discrepancies in even among kind of the actors in the state with how many people they thought with IDD were living in nursing facilities. And we also looked at the federal minimum data set, which is provided by CMS. And that those numbers also were higher than the numbers that were provided to us by the Division of Developmental Disabilities in New Jersey. So, our first biggest concern was that the state of New Jersey really doesn't know how many people with IDD were living in nursing facilities. Next slide, please. And so we had several recommendations provided in the report, the first of which related to this key finding one was that New Jersey should maintain a cross-agency data collection of individuals with IDD in nursing homes, to just have a better understanding of how many people are living in nursing facilities, and to make sure that they are able to make efforts to potentially move these individuals back into the community. We also had recommended that there be a public dashboard with non-identifiable information about people with IDD in nursing homes, and that New Jersey should monitor and analyze the available data in the minimum data set provided by CMS around individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities in nursing homes. Next slide, please. Our second key finding is related to the PASSAR system. So the PASSAR system is the pre-admission screening and resident review. And so this is a federal law that is really supposed to serve as a barrier to prevent the unnecessary institutionalization of individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities, as well as mental health disabilities, from being unnecessarily placed into nursing facilities. And so the idea really is that there is this concern that perhaps there aren't services available in the community, or that there aren't really options available. And so individuals with IDD and mental health disabilities are kind of unnecessarily placed in nursing homes. And so in terms of the PASSAR law, in New Jersey's application of the PASSAR law doesn't comply with federal law. And so this is really related to New Jersey's implementation of specialized services. These are services that are supposed to be provided to individuals with IDD and mental health disabilities. And New Jersey has the definition of specialized services does not comport with federal law. And that we also had a concern that we're overusing kind of categorical determinations, which are ways for people to kind of get into nursing homes despite maybe having IDD and mental health disabilities. And we really want to make sure that PASSAR is being used as an Olmstead tool. Next slide, please. And so our findings coming out related to PASSAR is really that New Jersey should review the state's implementation of the PASSAR and have an understanding of how it doesn't align with federal law and make sure that it does so, really redesigning this process with a focus on person-centered framework, and that New Jersey should amend the definition of specialized services to comply with federal law. Next slide, please. And then finally, our last key finding was that throughout the state, people with IDD are not afforded their constitutionally protected right to self-determination regarding where they live. And this is obviously a big concern that we had when we were going to these facilities on the ground, speaking to people, kind of asking how they ended up in a nursing facility. A lot of people had really kind of indicated that they didn't want to be there, that they maybe didn't even know how they ended up there. There were a lot of people who had made their way into nursing homes really kind of from a hospitalization. And so perhaps they maybe had injured themselves, needed to get some rehab, went to the hospital, then went to a rehab, and ended up staying in nursing homes for months, if not years. And so this really goes against the individual's right to self-determination, really, for them to decide where they want to live. And this really, again, this aligns with federal person-centered planning rights, And of course, I think a barrier that we probably see throughout the country, but particularly in New Jersey, is housing barriers, with individuals just not being able to have their needs met in the community. And that's a lot of times how somebody ends up in a nursing home, because there aren't really options in the community. But of course, that doesn't align with Olmsted and the ADA. Next slide, please. And so our key findings, the recommendations coming out from key finding 3 are that New Jersey specifically should review person-centered planning rights and practices to make sure that they comply with federal law. That New Jersey should review and revise service plans and planning processes to ensure that we are maintaining people's right to self-determination and person-centered planning. And that New Jersey's Division of Developmental Disabilities should dedicate a team to work with people with IDD in nursing homes who want to return to the community. And I will just say that, again, our report focused on the IDD population, but the PASSAR laws, really all of these laws, are also applicable to people with mental health disabilities. And a big thing that came out of this report was not just the understanding that we had about people with IDD in nursing homes, but also, really kind of seeing the correlation to people with mental health disabilities and their unnecessary institutionalization in nursing homes, which Amy is going to speak a little bit more about. Next slide, please. And that's just some information that we have about, there's more you can certainly learn from our website, but thank you very much. And Amy's going to share a little bit more about what LTCO is seeing on the ground.
Thanks, Brent, so much for really teeing that up. So we can go ahead and advance to the next slide. So just as Brent was saying, we've really been seeing an increase in the last several years, and in particular during the public health emergency, really accelerating. We're really seeing an increase in the facilities of residents who have mental health diagnoses. This is also kind of combined with some other trends, like seeing, a lot of younger residents in the nursing homes. We've got a lot of residents who were formerly homeless and in the nursing homes, sometimes formerly incarcerated folks. And, not all of the folks who have mental health diagnoses this is true of, but certainly many of the folks that we are seeing really do not need traditional nursing home care, or perhaps, very minimal care, but they do need some type of mental health related services and supports. So, that's a trend that's obviously very alarming to us. And I'm sure, for folks who are listening in from wherever you're sitting, this is not just something that's happening in New Jersey, but we hear all the time from our partners in other states that this is just something that we're really seeing across the country. And as Bryn was just saying, all of this really appears to be tied very closely to the lack of affordable supportive housing in our state. And I know that's also not unique to New Jersey. I will say that New Jersey is a state that's really up at the top of the pile, probably with New York and California, in terms of, the cost of, apartments, the cost of housing. So, we've been seeing these trends for some time, and, and we're really trying to think both practically on the ground in terms of our advocacy, and also systemically at higher levels, what we can do to try to impact this trend that we're seeing. Because of course, we do not want to see a bunch of folks with mental health issues confined to the nursing homes simply because, they don't have another place to go. I think we can go to the next slide. So just as Bryn was saying, the report that Bryn was reviewing, which, we really give so much props to Disability Rights for putting that report out, because I think it was very illuminating. And just like Bryn was saying at the end, it's clearly a template. It's not just that report. Of course, it was funded by an organization that focuses on intellectual and developmental disabilities, but the conclusions are equally applicable to folks with mental health needs in the nursing homes as well. So we're seeing the same problems with the mental health population, as we're seeing with the developmentally disabled and intellectually disabled populations, which is, we're seeing that folks are really being improperly institutionalized, and that this is almost always related to the fact that they don't have a place to go, they don't have an apartment in the community. Just as Bryn was describing for the ID and DD population, we're seeing a lack of specialized services. So people are going through the PASSAR process, needs are being identified through that process, they're being placed in the nursing homes, but then in virtually no nursing homes in New Jersey are there specialized mental health services that would really meet the needs of the folks who have gone through the PASSAR and had their needs identified. We also just see across the board, and I'm sure other folks who work in the nursing home space see this too, not unique to people with mental health issues, just a real lack of person-centered planning and care in general. And so, of course, with folks who have mental health needs, that can just exacerbate the situation further, right? Because if you're not really looking at the person's individual needs, their behaviors, their psychosocial needs, all of that, then they're not being served in the nursing homes in a good way. And we also see often, although we do see some staff that seem to have, some really good and solid skills in this area, I would say most of the nursing home staff just really haven't been properly trained to care for the growing number of folks, who are having mental health issues in the nursing homes. Next slide. So going back a few years, we became really heavily involved, and Bryn and their team was too at Disability Rights. We became very heavily involved in a giant nursing home in Northwest New Jersey that was called Andover, and later it was renamed Woodland. And this was a place that was over 500 beds, and it was housing mostly folks who had mental health or intellectual or developmental disabilities. Like 90-something% of the folks there had mental health diagnoses, and they were mostly there because the state didn't really seem like it could find better alternatives for those folks. So that facility really began to implode. It was notoriously mismanaged, and the care was very poor. And our office stepped in to help close that facility and transition the individuals out of that facility to better environments. But anyway, during that process, there was a lot of concern that there were so many residents that needed a place to go and so many residents that had behavioral health needs that the state basically stood up these two intermediate behavioral health nursing home units within pre-existing nursing homes to try to accommodate some of the folks that were coming out of Woodland. I think in the end, the timing was such that most of the Woodland residents were already placed in other nursing homes by the time these were up and running. But they started to fill up with individuals nonetheless, because I was just saying, of course, there's a lot of folks with behavioral health needs in the nursing homes. So these facilities are licensed. There are no regulations that govern them, but there are licensure requirements. And I would say a few weeks after these places opened, maybe it was more like a couple months, our advocate who's out in the field, Jen McMahon, who's been really instrumental in this work, she started to identify some issues with these places. She started seeing that, residents were there for long stretches of time when it seemed like, they really didn't need to be there, or they were stabilized and really should be moving on to a less restrictive setting, but they weren't. She started seeing that, therapies that you would think would be needed and required for this population were not always being provided, that the mix of residents, and I know this started to blow up, I think at some point last year, that the mix of residents was actually becoming quite unstable and dangerous, because you would have a mix of, some really frail, it's mostly men, I think, in these units still. So you would have a lot of, alert and oriented, younger, strong guys with behavioral health issues walking around, and then in a mix of, older, much more frail nursing home residents who might be, you know, not, I think hardly any of them are bedbound, but in a wheelchair or something like that. And so we started to become very alarmed by that case mix, which just seemed, you know, strange and inappropriate. Other issues, the nursing home residents on these units, especially in one of the facilities, not so much in the other, were really being completely segregated, like not being able to use common spaces that the regular nursing home residents had access to, and things of that nature. So our concern around these units, and I should have said in the beginning, this is really supposed to be a pilot program. Our concern about these units has been kind of steady and growing since the beginning. And while we recognize, of course, the real need or the desire to find a solution to these problems, I think, you know, our experience has been more and more that, you know, this hybrid kind of thing is really not it. And then it goes without saying, but I will talk about it, of course, just like Bren was saying, you know, we have really serious Olmstead and constitutional concerns in general about this model because it's inherently segregated. And a lot of the residents that we're seeing, frankly, are no different than residents that are populating the rest of our nursing homes in our state. So I think we can move on to the next slide. So our, you know, kind of individual advocacy and our targeted advocacy here in these facilities has revolved really around trying to improve the conditions, trying to make sure that residents are more integrated into the full community of the nursing home, making sure that they're receiving discharge planning and that there's a plan from the beginning to transition people through and out of this unit as opposed to just sitting there for long periods of time. And basically just making sure that the residents' needs are truly being met. We've been also partnering a lot with Disability Rights. Thank you, Bren, and your team through this process, and also speaking a lot with the public guardian and with the guardians in our state, because a lot of these folks have guardians, to make sure that they're aware of what we're seeing in these units and to really advocate for the residents to have more freedoms. Next slide, and I think it's the last. So, you know, as I was saying in the beginning, we'd already been thinking a lot about, you know, these trends that we're seeing. And I think working through these, you know, behavioral health nursing home pilots and trying to monitor that situation has really just hammered home for us the need for some real serious reforms in our state. And again, I'm sure this is true across many of the states for folks who are listening from other places. We need more housing. We need more supportive housing. We need more affordable housing. And we absolutely need to invest in that because like Bren was saying, a lot of the reason why these folks are ending up in nursing homes is because, you know, people feel like that's an easier placement than, you know, pounding the pavement and trying to find places in the community. We know that there's a huge lack of affordable and accessible housing in our state, and we really have to do something about that if we're going to really deinstitutionalize the nursing homes. One of the other things we want to do is eliminate institutional bias and strengthen the home and community-based services system. I know Hannah's going to touch on some of that. Like Brent said, we want to make sure that the PASSAR process is working as intended and as federally required. It should be an Olmstead tool to deinstitutionalize. It should not be a tool to lock people in nursing homes. That is not the intent of the PASSAR. We need more robust training for folks who are working in these facilities. We need to make sure that if and when residents are being passed into nursing homes, that they are receiving the services that they are supposed to be getting, the specialized services that they are due through the PASSAR process. And obviously, and I know I'm preaching to the choir here, we have to have better staffing levels, right? So that we can make sure that people can achieve their highest level of functionality and that they have good quality of life in these facilities for as long as they're going to reside in these facilities, which for a lot of these folks, we hope is not a long time. We want to see these folks thriving and doing well in the community and receiving services that they need in the community. So I think with that, I'm done, and I'm going to pass it along to Hannah for her perspective.
Thanks so much, Amy. Hello, everyone. My name is Hannah Diamond. I'm a policy advocate at Justice and Aging. We'll move on to the next slide. A little bit about us. Justice and Aging is a national organization. We use the power of law to fight senior poverty. And we advocate on behalf of populations that have been historically marginalized and excluded from justice. These are populations like women, people of color, LGBTQ+ individuals, and people with limited English proficiency. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, our focus externally at Justice and Aging is on specific populations that have been marginalized and excluded from justice. But we also have an internal commitment to equity and advancing equity. And that means recruiting, supporting, and retaining a diverse staff and board. Next slide, please. So Amy, in her final slide, kind of teed up what I'm going to be talking about, which is opportunities to expand equitable access to home and community-based services. And we work on a national level, but we have support to be doing work in New Jersey. So I'm going to share with you an equity framework that we developed, and then how we're applying that equity framework to advance access to services in the community for older adults and people with disabilities. Next slide, please. So first, I just want to do some level setting and talk a little bit about the institutional bias. Basically, due to statute or federal Medicaid law, an individual can receive access to services in a nursing facility regardless of where they live in the country, but they cannot necessarily receive services in the community. States are required to provide care in a nursing facility, but they are not required to provide the full range of services that an individual needs in the community. And as Bren mentioned, the Olmstead case has really increased our ability as advocates, and we've also seen a lot of policy changes that have occurred over the last few years to address something called rebalancing, so shifting funds away from institutionalized care and put them more towards the community. And although we have made progress, we have a significant ways to go. Next slide, please. So specific to New Jersey is ranked 35th nationally when it comes to rebalancing. According to the most recent data available, about 48% of Medicaid LTSS dollars are spent on home and community-based services, and 52% is spent on institutionalized care. But that figure in and of itself can actually be misleading when you stratify that spending by population type. So when we look at it by the amount of money that is spent on older adults and people with disabilities, we actually find that the majority of spending is going towards institutionalized care. So just 21% of those funds, those Medicaid LTSS dollars, were spent on home and community-based services for older adults and people with disabilities. So approximately 80% of the state's funding was going towards institutionalized care. Next slide, please. And next slide. So I think it's really important to ground us in the populations that we're talking about here. So in the state of New Jersey, I'm talking about populations that are dually eligible for the most part for Medicare and Medicaid. And I think what's important to take away from this slide is that populations that are dually eligible are more diverse than the Medicare only population. Next slide, please. If you all are interested in the specific ways that services are delivered through the state's Medicaid program, you can look at this slide. But as a big picture takeaway and what I'm going to talk about, the Medicaid program in New Jersey, it's called NJ Family Care. It has many different ways of accessing services depending upon the individual. And these services, because of differing financial eligibility criteria and different clinical eligibility criteria, they are ripe for inequities. Next slide, please. Next slide. So why is it important to have an equity framework and to be critical of HCBS infrastructures? Well, these programs are susceptible to drivers of inequity. They are created by humans, and humans perpetuate their own biases. And so we see the implications of racism, of ageism, of ableism within these systems. This is embedded within law itself. I noted earlier about the statutory requirements requiring care in a nursing facility, but not in the community. And these structural and historical barriers, the result of these barriers is poor quality care or lack of access to care for particular populations. And so we developed this framework on the next slide to really give us the tools as policymakers, as advocates, as recipients of these services to really be thinking critically about the entire lifespan of an HCBS system. So from the beginning to the end and throughout, where are inequities arising and how can we target resources to address the needs of particular communities? Next slide, please. So we have 5 different domains that I'm going to be walking you through, and for each domain, I'm going to give you a New Jersey specific example. The first is program design, the second is provider availability, third is program awareness and enrollment, fourth is assessment and authorization of services, fifth is the actual provision of services. And I want to note that data is a key point throughout all these domains. We need transparency, we need granular information about what's happening in order to create these targeted solutions. Next slide, please. So program design. First, we're starting with the Medicaid authority. So what authority is used to provide these services? For example, if it's a state plan benefit, state plans have to be available, or those services have to be available to any individual who is eligible. Whereas if a waiver authority is used, a state can waive that authority and provide care for a particular population or in a particular geographic area. Another thing to think about is there a cap on enrollment? Who can't access these services because of that limitation? And oftentimes another thing to note is the level of care criteria. There's a cost neutrality requirement often with HCBS services. So individuals who are potentially higher cost may not be able to access services in the community because of that. And that's something we need to be mindful of. Community engagement. This is a really key one. Were individuals with lived experience consulted and engaged, and how? Were they consulted after a program was already developed, or were they central to the design of these programs? Which benefits are included and which benefits are excluded? For example, are respite services included? And is there a wait list, and how is that wait list managed? Is it priority based? Is it first come, first serve? These are all just questions to get us started to identify some of those disparities. Next slide, please. So here I'm sharing about some work. This is our biggest priority for this year in New Jersey. We are advocating to address inequitable financial eligibility criteria with various NJ family care pathways. Basically, older adults and people with disabilities are subject to more stringent financial eligibility criteria. So essentially, when an individual turns 65 or when they become Medicare eligible and they're no longer eligible for Medicaid expansion, they are at risk of losing their services because they're subject to stricter financial criteria, although nothing else has changed. So here we are working to address kind of the disparities between the various NJ family care programs. That when it comes to income, we're trying to raise the income for the ABD population for state plan benefits to 138% to align with Medicaid expansion. And then when it comes to assets, we're trying to increase the asset eligibility from either $2,000, $4,000, or $9,000 to $40,000. And this really mirrors kind of best practices that we've seen in other states like California and like New York. Next slide, please. Provider availability. So here we're thinking about whether or not individuals can access providers. Do network adequacy standards perpetuate the status quo, or are they increasing access? What are the reimbursement rates that are paid to providers, and does this allow for investment in the workforce? And what supports are available to caregivers? Next slide, please. So here, there's a lot of text on this slide, my apologies, but the big picture takeaway here is that the assisted living benefit in New Jersey is most readily available to individuals who live in the least diverse settings, or the least diverse counties. And this is consistent with national data. So an example of a policy intervention that we want to see here is targeted funding to enable populations that are more diverse to receive access to this benefit. Next slide, please. Program awareness and enrollment. So how are individuals learning about these services? Is this information centralized? Is it accessible? Is the state conducting outreach, and how? Are they providing the correct information? And once someone is able to access the correct program and they're going to apply for that program, are the application materials written in a language that they understand? And is the state providing support to help an individual complete that application if needed? Next slide, please. So here's an example. We've heard from stakeholders on the ground that it's very complicated to navigate New Jersey's resources. That's not unique to New Jersey. We hear this across states, but I just want to provide an example of kind of the implications of that. If resources are not centralized or easy to find, then oftentimes an individual must rely on their community of support. And if particular populations are not tapped into a community of support, or if they don't have a strong relationship with, for example, a primary care provider who can make such a referral, they might miss out on a critical resource. And we find this to be true in terms of referrals and knowledge of the PACE program. PACE is a program that integrates both Medicare and Medicaid, and we find lower rates of knowledge about the PACE program amongst Black and Latino older adults. And this is consistent with research findings that find that dually eligible individuals of color are less likely to have a relationship with a healthcare provider and then receive such a referral to a PACE program. Next slide, please. Fourth is assessment and authorization of services. The main takeaway from this slide is these assessment processes, an algorithm or an individual, they are all kind of hindered by implicit and explicit bias. They were created by humans. So we need to be really aware of how those biases are perpetuating inequities. Next slide, please. And here is an example. We have the Money Follows the Person program in New Jersey. As was discussed earlier, it's called I Choose Home. And this program is incredibly successful. We've seen over 3,000 transitions from this program. I would just note that when we stratify by age, again, we're seeing lower rates of transitions of older adults from institutionalized settings to the community. And this is quite alarming because proportionally, there are more older adults in nursing facilities than other populations. So we would expect the transitions to be proportional. And so this is just another area where we need targeted focus and funding to enable more transitions of older adults. Next slide, please. And then the final bucket here, thanks for bearing with me, is the actual provision of these services. Are these services meeting the needs of individuals? What are the quality of these services? You know, there's a voluntary HCBS quality measure set. We would argue that many of the measures within that measure set are not meaningful. So are we getting meaningful information that is informed by the recipients themselves about the quality of these services? And are these services accessible in terms of language, and are they culturally competent? Next slide, please. And as my final example, this is one that you are probably all very familiar with, and this is not specific to New Jersey, is the concern that LGBTQ+ older adults are receiving poorer quality care in nursing facilities due to discrimination, and how that impacts their health outcomes and their provider choice. Next slide, please. So I have resources for you. I gave you a lot of information. I encourage you all to look at our website. Next slide, please, and to sign up for our listserv. Thanks so much.
thanks very much. That was really, each one of you just was so articulate and such thoughtful presentations. I really appreciate it. I'm sure our audience did as well. We have a lot of questions, see a lot in the chat as well. A little housekeeping before we move on to Q&A. February's webinar will be on the 20th at 1 p.m. Eastern. Please save the date. You can register below, and we'll be sharing more information about speakers and materials before then, of course. Once again, please check us out on Instagram, where you can find out announcements about new programs, new reports, new data like staffing data when we put them out every quarter, etc. By joining us on Instagram. And then head to our website, nursinghome411.org, for materials from today's webinar, nursinghome411.org/webinar-disability-rights. Brent, Amy, and Hannah all provided a lot of really great information. So we'll have the recording up by the end of the week, but we will have their presentations up, I believe today, if they're not already up, and you could use that to find more information on their websites about their reports and materials and resources. Few things on our Learning Center on our website, again at nursinghome411.org. We have fact sheets on key nursing home standards, easy to use for residents and families and those working with them, assisted living guides for prospective residents, current residents, staff, and operators, administrators. We have a terrific family empowerment resource center with outreach and help to start or empower your family council. And then our resident abuse, neglect, and crime reporting center are just a few of the resources that we have available there on the website. Oops, I didn't change that from happy holidays, but I hope everyone did have a happy holiday, excuse me. And I'm going to open it up for questions and answers. Please, again, I know someone had their hand up. If you have a question, please put in the Q&A. I'll try to get to as many as I can. I'm going to do a little cherry picking here. And actually, I'm going to start with a question from me. And that question is actually, it's a two-part question. The first part is to Hannah. Hannah, you mentioned that you were, Justice in Aging had funding to do this in a number of states. Can you tell us what they are, just so people know?
Sure. So in New Jersey specifically, we have funding from the Henry and Marilyn Taub Foundation. But we have mixed funding, really, and we really try to diversify that. The other states that we probably work most extensively in is California. But we've also recently received, which is very exciting, support from Arnold Ventures to work with 10 different states. And we're going to be selecting the 10 states to work with advocates in those states to better integrate Medicare and Medicaid. So stay out for information about that as well.
That's great, thanks. And then kind of the second part to that question, because it related to, where this work is and where these efforts and advocacy are happening is, Brent, I was wondering if you got any response from the state to the report.
We did, yes. So we are lucky in a lot of respects, because I think that we do have a fairly good working relationship with the state. They are very amenable to meeting with us, discussing things with us. The Division of Developmental Disabilities was the agency that provided us with this initial list of people. So we do have a good working relationship with them. I'm sorry, can you just repeat your question again?
Oh yeah,
Richard?
no, I was wondering what if any response they had, because you
yes,
really, rightfully so, called them out in terms of the PASAR, in terms of how they were implementing.
yes. So yeah, they have been very receptive to meeting with us. We've had numerous conversations with them since the report was released. And so I know that the state is working to make a significant revisions in New Jersey to the PASAR process, and they do want Disability Rights New Jersey and other stakeholders involved. And as it relates to mental health disabilities as well, even though our report didn't focus on that, that is also something that we're having engaging conversations with the state to hopefully try to make some revisions and changes to these laws so that they aren't, resulting in unnecessary institutionalization.
That's great. That's great to hear because it can be challenging to get through the states. So that's really good. So I'm going to go to some of the questions. Again, I apologize. We have a lot of questions. I'm going to need to cherry pick a little bit, try to pick some that are more general. So an anonymous attendee asked two kind of related questions. What facilities would individuals with IDD typically reside in? What qualifies for an individual with IDD to be qualified to be admitted to a nursing home? And then does IDD encompass people who have a disability due to a stroke, for instance, or is this only for those who are born with IDD? So kind of questions around who they are and how they might qualify for to be admitted to a nursing home.
So I think I could probably take a stab at this one. So typically, so in New Jersey for the Division of Developmental Disabilities, and this is a pretty typical definition. So the onset of the disability would be prior to age 21. So generally individuals with a stroke, they will typically fall under, that's typically categorized as a traumatic brain injury, a TBI. And so they aren't often individuals that are receiving services through like the Division of Developmental Disabilities. But of course you could have a diagnosis of an intellectual developmental disability and then potentially have a stroke at some point. In terms of facilities where individuals with the IDD reside, just like really like everybody can reside in just a whole range of different places. A lot of the individuals we met in our report had come from, some people come from developmental centers, which are institutions where individuals with IDD live. A lot of people came from family homes. A big issue that we saw was that they perhaps were living with family members. Those family members had aged, potentially passed away. And that's really kind of maybe what precipitated them going into a nursing home. And then in terms of qualifying to be admitted in a nursing home in New Jersey, there's assistance with 3 activities of daily living. And so that's often why many people with IDD are able to get into a nursing home. And again, because New Jersey has an incorrect implementation of the PASSAR process, if somebody is found to need specialized services, they can't go into a nursing home. And that's really a backwards view of the federal PASSAR law. So that's also that kind of gatekeeping that PASSAR is supposed to provide for people with IDD going to nursing homes isn't happening.
Really interesting. Thank you. So this question I think is more for Amy, but please, anyone, of course, feel free. Is there anything illegal about a resident being forced to reside with a formerly incarcerated resident? Are nursing homes aware of prior charges of newly admitted residents?
Really good question. I mean, I think at the end of the day, I think the short answer is no. I don't think that's something that the nursing home is necessarily privy to, and I'm not sure that that's something that the nursing home has to inform other residents about. I guess if the nursing home, had to, of course, if the nursing home has like an active concern about someone having, behaviors that are potentially violent, then, they need to do things that will help, protect not only the other residents, but will help the person that's experiencing that behavior. But I think the short answer is no. It's, I think it's not proper or right for the nursing home to, tell residents that their roommate was in jail at some point in time. I mean, I don't think so. I think the answer to that is no.
Thank you. Yeah, and if I may, I would just add that, it's always the nursing home's responsibility to ensure the safety and dignity of everyone in the
Exactly.
So I maybe 1 or 2 more questions. I thought this was interesting from Kerry White. Can someone talk about PASSARs that have the level 1 section identifying dementia instead of IDD, causing a reduction in outside services that can be provided?
So in terms of that, I'm not, so there is the PASSAR process does have a dementia exclusion, which essentially it's supposed to be a situation in which, and this is obviously very difficult to kind of ascertain, is what is the primary diagnosis? What is for people, is it really the dementia that is kind of there's more concerns related to it, or is it the diagnosis of IDD or a mental health disability? So that can create a lot of kind of confusion and difficulties in terms of receiving services on the outside. I'm not entirely sure what you're referring to, but for example, in terms of the PASSAR process, if there is a co-occurring dementia diagnosis, and that is something where it's determined that kind of the needs of the dementia are higher than the IDD or mental health diagnosis, then that would typically allow somebody to be admitted into a nursing home, where perhaps the PASSAR would serve as a barrier in another instance.
Thank you. Did Hannah or Amy, did you want to add to that, or? Oh,
No, honestly, I really have no expertise in that. On that question, I have nothing to say.
So I think one more question, this kind of is a good wrap up, and I'm sorry that we didn't get some more questions. Is the long-term care facility option preferred because Medicaid will pay the high cost of housing in a long-term care facility, whereas in the community, all costs would be borne by the resident? Is that why high-priced SNFs went out over high-cost, supportive, accessible community housing? I think, but
No.
person means preferred because it's, as I think Bren was saying before, because it's a guaranteed benefit under Medicaid, whereas HCBS is not. So is that why we have that imbalance? I think is kind of the question here.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's like several fundamental reasons why people are in the nursing homes and Medicaid is paying for them to be in the nursing home versus in the community. I think that's lack of affordable and accessible housing, like we were saying. As Hannah touched on, there's all kinds of inequities and also imbalances in the home and community-based services system that pushes people more into institutions. So for example, sorry, I know we have no time. In New Jersey, you have to go through a lengthy process to get on Medicaid in the community. You have to show all your financial information, could take weeks or months. Well, if you're having a crisis or your family member is having a crisis, you're gonna go to the nursing home because you're not gonna get home health aides in your home. And you know that for some time, right? Medicaid is not gonna pay that because you're not on Medicaid because it takes a long time to get Medicaid. So that's one of the very strong institutional biases, I think, that has people in the nursing homes versus in the community. It's a lot more expensive for Medicaid to pay for people to be in the nursing homes versus the community. So it really doesn't make sense. But because our systems are set up the way they are to not be as responsive, and we have so much institutional bias in the way that our systems are set up, that just becomes the default. You have more and more people ending up at the institution when really they could be in the community. And that's why we have to change a lot of things about that to make sure that the default is community and the default is not the nursing home.
And I would
Thank
just
you.
add
Yeah.
really quickly that when individuals are surveyed about their care preferences and where they want to reside, home and community-based services comes up as the primary preference. So I think that, you know, the service and the infrastructure, as Amy said, like it is not as robust and developed as it needs to be. And we as advocates need to be and policymakers and funders need to be putting monies and our priorities to ensuring that individuals can get care in the location where they want.
Thank you. Yeah, I thought that was a good question to wrap up. It kind of, to me, fit in a lot of what you all said. Thank you again, Bren, Amy, and Hannah. Really, really appreciate it. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. We'll see you next month. Have a nice day. Thanks. Bye-bye now.